Well, let's get more on this now. We can talk to Ian Begg. He's a professor at the European Institute at the London School of Economics and Political Science. Well, thanks for joining us here on the programme. Well, David Cameron continues to claim that he's done nothing wrong. So why the need for this inquiry?
Well, it's one of these classic situations where he may not have done anything wrong according to the letter of the law, but if you apply what you might call the whiff test, it smells a bit off that he's used his privileged position to gain access to ministers in the hope of helping one of his pals, and, it should be added, a company in which he had share options. So it just does not smell right. And I think the government has recognised this, the civil service has recognised this, hence the reason for introducing the inquiry.
So what exactly are the rules for prime ministers and former members of the government when it comes to lobbying?
Well, there's a 2-year period during which they're not supposed to engage, or any former cabinet minister is supposed to put him or herself in a kind of purdah and not be involved in this kind of activity. But beyond that, it's pretty vague. And we've seen that other prime ministers have done various things. They've gone on speaking tours. Tony Blair for a while was advising the Kazakh government, which is not exactly the most shall we say, democracy-friendly outfit. So there are variations in this, but it's like many things in British public life. There is an expectation more than a rigid rule.
So how widespread then is this practice? Does it only just apply to prime ministers, or is it other politicians and former members of parliament?
Well, former members of parliament, former ministers will become involved in boardroom activity for companies. And it doesn't take a great amount of imagination to recognise that the reason companies want these people on their boards is their contact books, the people they know, the experience they've had. So there is a kind of subculture of former ministers who go on to do this kind of lucrative business work. But I think it's a long way short of the kind of corruption you might see in many other countries. It's influence. It's not direct corruption in the way we might understand it.
Well, Gordon Brown, another former UK Prime Minister, has called for a ban for at least 5 years for this type of activity, lobbying activity. Do you think that's a good idea?
Well, Gordon, as we all know, is a good Presbyterian. He's a very moral man who believes that you should do things because they're the right thing to do. So he would be the sort of person who would say you don't really need a rule in this, but having had to accept that the convention has been broken by David Cameron, he's probably correct to say that you need somehow to make this more formal. And what we've now heard announced for this inquiry is something I expect the Labour Party, which Gordon used to lead, to build on in trying to contest the next general election and indeed the imminent local elections.
Now, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, the UK Finance Minister Rishi Sunak, has been called to Parliament tomorrow to give further explanations over this affair. Are you expecting any heads to roll?
No, I don't think heads will roll on this, not least because although Rishi Sunak in particular responded to David Cameron's text, he didn't act on them, and no support was given to the Greensill company which Cameron was trying to push for. So no inappropriate action has been taken in the sense of money being spent. With hindsight, probably Rishi Sunak will be saying, well, yes, I should just have rejected these texts as soon as they came in rather than responding to them. But that's as much as he's done wrong.
Ian Begg from the London School of Economics and Political Science, thanks for joining us here on the programme.